Ready to start part 7 of the building of Dancing Feather, Boston Pilot Schooner. And this episode will probably be focused on starting the hull planking just below the covering boards and extending the covering boards outward beyond that. And we'll see how that goes. This is the first time I've ever built a ship with a round stern. So it's going to be interesting to see how the planking works out as it goes out into the flat round stern. Before we get started with the planking of the hull, it just occurred to me as I'm looking at this that with the bowsprit on and the rails, the cap rails, it does take on the silhouette somewhat of a feather. And I have no idea if that has anything to do with the name Dancing Feather, but certainly does look like a feather. Well, I've started planking the hull below the covering board, and the first plank fits into the rabbet at the stem pretty well, and bends back, and then it gets really interesting at the stern here. I've had to clamp things. It wants to twist a lot, and I knew this was going to be interesting. I think I'm going to have to use a little filler in here to blend the first plank to the bottom of the covering board where it makes that bend, because to try to get this curve and the twist at the same time is more than that plank is going to want to do, I think. But if I only have to use some filler here just under the covering board, it shouldn't be too bad. And we're starting the first plank now on the starboard side. The port side's already glued on. And right now I'm just trying to hold it in place with the curve this way. As I get further back, I'm going to have to take this and give it a twist to get it to lie flat against the bottom of the stern. So hopefully the first one has the worst twist in it, and after that they'll get easier. Alright, having put the first plank below the covering boards on, this being the port side, I've had to use some filler right along here as the board made the twist into the stern. And this is all going to get sanded and blended as the planks go on. But I don't think that's too bad. Use a little bit of filler in there and it'll disappear. Hopefully the next plank is going to ride nicely on top of this one, and we won't have to do that anymore. At this point, got 4 planks on each side on the hull. So we're starting to make progress. The lines don't look too bad on it. We'll see how it goes when we make the turn from the stern down the stern post. That's going to be an interesting transition. The planking of the hull is coming along, and it's interesting how it's all coming together at the stern. It is a complex shape. This is the probably the most difficult form to plank that I've had to deal with so far. Anyhow, it's kind of fun. Starting to run into trouble as the planks come further down onto the frames. What's happening is, up at the top, as the plank comes across, it starts off vertical and ends up horizontal, or close to horizontal as it gets into the stern. So it takes a twist as it goes from the bow all the way to the stern. Now that's a twist that over that length you can get that to go into the plank, into the twist of the plank pretty easily. But what's happening now is you're starting off near vertical, and then you want to go close to horizontal at midships and then back to vertical. So you get a double twist on it, and it's getting too difficult to get the plank to want to do that. So it's almost ending up like a lap strike planking as we go. So this is going to be the side that's painted. This side, we're done. That's as far as I'm going on it. I'm going to leave the frames exposed on the bottom. And that's sanded out reasonably well. I got a little more sanding to do, but that's going to look okay as I just put a clear coat of polyurethane on it. On the other side, we're going to be painting it. And because we're going to be painting it, I'm going to be using, again, the balsa filler, Model-Lite balsa filler. I've cheated a little with it around the stern here, again, because it's going to be painted. And I'm letting the planks actually come a little gapped at the end, and I'll be filling that in with the filler as well. So we're going to fill all this planking in with filler and then sand it all smooth. And because it's painted, it's not perfect, it'll just look perfect. Still adding planks, starting to close in on the keel. Again, you can see it looks like lap strike at this point, but we'll sand that down and fill in the gaps. I think it's going to look pretty nice. I've cut and fitted the last plank along the keel, and she's now ready for sanding and filler, so that we can fair everything in. I think it's going to be a pretty nice looking hull, actually. I've been sanding the planks, and they're starting to fare in reasonably well. And we're almost to the point where I'm going to start putting some filler into the cracks. These areas here where you have low spots, going to fill those in. And in the back here we got a couple of open seams that we want to put some filler into. But not too bad. I've given the hull a good coating of filler, and once this hardens up we'll be able to sand it down. And then once I'm through sanding the filler out, I'm going to make another batch of sanding filler using the nitrate dope and the baby powder. And we'll coat the whole hull before painting it, get rid of any minor cracks. So that should all smooth out very nicely, I think. All of the low spots have been filled in, and it's been sanded first with 120 grit to take down all the high spots, and then with 220 grit to take out some of the sanding scratches from the 120. And finally, I used a 400 grit to bring it down to where it is now. So this side's going to be painted, so none of the filler that's in the planking is going to show. And I'm going to mix up a batch of sanding filler using the nitrate dope and baby powder, and we're going to coat this whole thing to take out any possible last things that'll show through the paint. And then after that we'll go back and clean up and touch up the black paint that's been damaged during the planking process, putting clamps on things and whatnot. So we'll clean all that up. And at that point, we'll probably be ready to give it a coat of paint. Going to get ready here to mix up another batch of my sanding filler. You can see it's not a precise science, this mixing of powder and nitrate dope, but the idea is to get it thick enough that the baby powder is going to fill in any minor imperfections in the surface. I'm only going to coat the side that's going to be painted because I want to use a clear coat of polyurethane on the other side. And the baby powder gives it a whiteness to it that isn't necessarily desirable. That should do it. Probably take about 10 minutes to dry, and then we'll be able to sand it. And again, the nice thing about the baby powder is not only does it fill in the cracks, but when you sand it, it actually smells pretty good. Just clean my brush using a lacquer thinner that I've marked here as solvent, and the other can has water in it for the water-based acrylic enamels. And those are the two cans that I use to clean my brushes in. I find out that the Folgers plastic, whatever they make these things out of, are completely impervious to solvents. When I painted my car restorations, I used these for the automotive paints, for mixing paints, and I also put lacquer thinner and MEK and other chemicals into them, and that plastic holds up to everything. It's they're great. They're almost as good as having the old tin cans. It hasn't even been 10 minutes, and already I'm able to sand the sanding filler down. Using 400 grit. I'm not using a block at this point because I'm using such a fine sandpaper. I'm really not shaping anything or misshaping anything. I'm simply removing a very thin layer of the sanding primer. now have a nice smooth surface here on which we can apply paint. And I think once I blow all the dust off of this thing, it's going to be in pretty nice shape for painting. This side is going to get a coat of wipe-on poly, and it's not going to be painted, so I'm not putting any nitrate on there. Next, I'm going to put a little wipe-on poly on the side that's going to be unfinished. I'll get some crud here. Put a little in the cup here, because there are parts of it that I think I might want to brush on, or at least use a Q-tip to get into some of the ribs and whatnot. Starting to look pretty decent. Q-tips. Help me get into places that I can't with the wipe on. Looks pretty decent. I'll let that dry. We'll give it another coat. Getting ready to paint some of the black here. The black will come below the water line, so I don't need to go all the way down the hull, although it won't hurt because I can always paint the bottom paint over the black. So just don't want to come short with it is all. Like this, I'll take it all the way to the bottom. I can paint over it afterwards. That's about all the work I can do with the big brush. So now I'm going to get out a smaller brush that I can work with. Sure, trip over the stool, Roy. There, that's a little better. Of course, as this dries, it's a flat black, so it is even less likely to show any dust or anything that gets into it. While the black is drying here, I'm going to take on a little different project because now that we planked the hull, it no longer fits into the assembly jig. And the assembly fixture would be very useful to have as a cradle while we're doing the rigging and other things to the boat. So I'm going to draw a line outside of the notches for the frames to include a thickness of planking. And then we'll cut that all out because I won't be building another model of the Dancing Feather, and if I ever did, I could make a new top with notches in it. So it'll be more useful going forward in a couple of ways. One is this is the water line, so when I go to draw the water line in, if I can sit it down in the cradle, it's going to be easy to mark the water line. And two, I'll be able to work off of this surface to measure the angle of rake of the mast when I step the mast. So having it in the cradle is going to be very useful. Using the French curve, I've drawn a line outside the notches. And we're going to cut that out, and that'll make a nice cradle for the boat to sit in while we work on it. Now that the black is starting to dry, you can see the nice smooth shape of the hull. So, looks like we're starting to achieve what we set out to do. Oh, guess what blade is too long to do that? Better start over. I had to shorten the blade a bit, so this should work out a little better. Oh, what's going on? This isn't working out all as well as I hoped. I think I made the blade just a little too short this time. We're going to start over again. Well, we're going to try number 3. I think this blade should work. give that a try and see how the boat fits. The cradle has been cleared out now to allow for the thickness of the hull and more, and gives us a nice place to set the boat into. We're trying to work on it. It's the unfinished side. And this being the finished side. After a little bit, when I get enough coats of black on it, because it's going to need another coat, we'll mark the water line, which is right here, and then we'll be able to paint the bottom paint. The next step here is to take the piece that we bent to go around the stern. This is the edge of the covering board. It's going to appear almost like a molding going around the hull. And right now we need to round this over to a half round, because again it is the edge of the covering board which would be rounded over. So we'll sand the edges down here, get rid of the squareness. This is a 220 grit that I'm using. I don't want to be too aggressive with the small piece. Here, take it down a little at a time. And when I finish with this, we'll give it a hit with the 400 grit sandpaper. And then we'll follow that up with a coating of the off-white. The reason I want to paint it before I put it on is, again, it'll give me a clean edge against the black hull that I won't be able to paint after it's glued on. Anyhow, that's what we're up to. Just finished gluing the outer edge of the covering board onto the stern. Starts to trim that off rather nicely. Now I have to round over some strips to come up from the bowsprit back to here, and that'll complete the covering board outer edge, and it will appear as a molding the length of the boat. The covering boards are now complete all the way around the boat. The starboard side. And the port side. So this looks like it's a good spot to end part 7.